Hey guys, it's Joey, the pastor with no answers. Thanks for checking back in. Before we continue, I want to thank Grant Smith for joining the PWNA Patreon. Thank you for supporting. Got a group of like 20 of us that casually keep in touch, and I'll throw some communication out there once in a while, but if you would like to support this podcast, you can go to pastorwithnoanswers.com and connect with our social media, and you can also click contribute to figure out where to go to support. But thank you for being a listener. You can go to iTunes and give us a rating. We'd appreciate it. So here's Chip Judd and a conversation about bad parents.
Well, this is the Pastor with No Answers, and I know a lot of you all have been checking the feed every week to see when my friend Pastor Chip Judd would be back. And I have to admit, like this, am I taking advantage of our friendship, Chip? Because I will think about a subject, and then I'll think, oh, Chip seems to be a good guy to talk about it, and then I just assume that we're going to have a killer episode where you're going to unleash all this wisdom, and I already have like a check going in my mind, like it's checking a box. Okay, that episode is good to go. Chip will do it. Is that taking advantage of you, or like taking you for granted?
Joey,
I don't try to.
You're so far past taking advantage of me that it's ridiculous. I mean, if I billed you for what you owe me, gosh, dude, I'd own your children, man. No, I'm kidding.
We've talked about mental illness on here a lot, and I have talked about you anonymously because I've been trying to help people understand, or just bring up the whole topic of, your mental health being something that you can actually take care of and do different things. And you are the pastor / employer of mine back in 2012 that pretty much told me to work less hours, not taking that time off, and just doing it in a way like spending those 5 or 10 hours doing exactly what you would want to do, whether that's sleep or jog or watch a movie or read the Bible or just anything. And why did you feel compelled to do that? Like, why is that a good thing? Because a lot of people would say, oh, well, that's regular people can't do that. Like, just because you're depressed, you get to stop doing stuff.
Yeah, but I don't know that that's true. Regular people might have to have a different variation on it. In other words, they may not be able to do it as part of their work day, but if they have a support system around them, spouse, friends, whatever, there's ways, because what it's doing is purchasing. Everything's a purchase. You're giving up one thing of value for another.
Yeah.
So everything is a purchase of some kind. And I know you and knew you somewhat then, a good bit. And I knew you needed some replenishment, plus I knew you had an overzealous sense of duty and responsibility. So I was kind of working on a couple of things at the same time. I believed your brain needed a break to just reset its chemicals a little bit.
Right.
But I also believed your heart needed to deal with, do I get my value from working hard and impressing people and whatever? So for me, it was kind of a sneaky double whammy there.
Gotcha. All right, Mr. Miyagi. Well, I actually did. That's exactly what happened with this episode. I started thinking of something, and then I thought, well, I definitely am always curious about what Chip would have to say, and I figured, hey, let's just make it into an episode, because I think a lot of people probably wonder the same thing. And then, timely enough, last night, Priscilla and I watched 3 This Is Us episodes. And it's a wonderful show, and I won't do any spoils for those of you that have not caught up. But yes, I love it. Yes, it makes me sad every time. Yes, I think it's wonderful, and I actually don't think it's cheesy. I think it's a great, great show. But this last episode is exactly what I'm talking about. Jack Pearson, who is kind of the central figure, he's the dad, and you get a depiction of all these kids when they were young and they had their dad, and then when they grow older and their dad's a little older, then when they grow older and their dad's not in the picture anymore, and all of that. He's the central figure, and he had it got into it big time this last episode. He got in. His dad was horrible. His dad just sat in a chair waiting for his two sons to get home so he can verbally lash out at them, humiliate them. And I was thinking about, we already had this episode scheduled before I even saw this episode, but I've been wondering what happens. What happens to a parent? Because Joey Svensson feels a love for his kids that if I do anything that I feel hurts them, and it was not a good hurt, like it wasn't just a matter of discipline, but it was something that I did wrong, it would mess with me because I love them so much, and I'd have to be, I would feel compelled to say, look, I was off there. I'm really sorry. I love you. I care about you. I'm sorry it came across that way. What in the world happens to parents that find themselves in a place of being a kid's worst nightmare? I mean, here it's mom, it's dad, and it's the kid's worst nightmare every single day. How does that happen? Do they lose the love for their kids?
No, I don't think that's the case. Now, their capacity to love might be different, meaning whether they've grown up in a home that allowed them to experience it to its fullest in a safe way. So their capacity, their strategies, the ways they give and receive love might be very limited.
Yeah.
But do they love their kids? I believe they do the best they can. Here's my bottom line, Joey. First of all, let me say this as a sort of a disclaimer. Not a disclaimer, but just to set it, make sure people listen to me correctly. There's a difference between an excuse and an explanation.
Yeah.
Nothing I'm going to say excuses bad behavior.
Right.
But I think if we explain it correctly, we will respond to it better, and we can be part of the solution instead of part of the problem.
Yeah.
So, simple thought. I believe every person is doing the best they can with what they have. And very relevant in this conversation. So you're telling me 30 plus years counseling. I'm sure you've seen all kinds of craziness, adults that are the product of early life difficulty, abuse, whatever. And you're going to sit there and tell me that you believe everybody's doing the best they can with what they have. Yes. And here's what I mean by that. I've never met an abusive person who wasn't abused.
Right.
I've never met a yeller who wasn't yelled at. I've never met someone who was sarcastic and stingy with their compliments that didn't grow up in an environment that was sarcastic and stingy with their compliments. My point being, you could almost say it like this, Joey. We give ourselves too much credit.
Yeah.
Those of us that don't abuse our kids, we give ourselves too much credit. And then those that do, we give them too much credit to think that they could overcome easily, quickly, whatever, the damage done to them in their childhood.
Gosh. So I mean, and to give a quick example, when we see the mom in the parking lot just unleashing on their kid loudly, saying horrible things, calling them horrible names, we should keep ourselves in check from letting anger run loose, and pair that with a little bit of sensitivity, knowing that that mom probably dealt with the same thing. Well,
again, let me just play with words a little bit. The Bible says, "Be angry and sin not."
Right.
So I don't know that anger's the issue. The issue for me would be judgment.
Yeah.
Do we judge that woman? In other words, here's what judgment to me would be. It would be putting both of us at the same level and saying, "I don't do that. Why does she do that?"
Right.
And that's just grossly unfair. It's unfair to believe that she had the same preparation for parenting that I did.
Yeah.
And so I'm judging her as if we went to the same school, the same class, and got the same grades. And now she's blowing the test.
But life is
and the reality of it,
life is so easier if we could just say these people are horrible. Isn't that crazy? There's a part of me that's just like, man, Chip is so right. And this is where Jesus is at. This is where life is. But there's a human part of me that's just like, yeah, but it's just so much easier to say these. That's just horrible.
But here's where my line would be, Joey, just so people don't think I'm out of my mind. I'm not, again, remember, I'm not excusing anything.
I know you're not.
I'm definitely not saying it's okay. I'm just explaining it in a way that makes us more likely to be part of the solution.
Right.
But here's my line. Get help. You may not have grown up in a healthy home. You may have been abused. You may not know what good parenting looks like. You wouldn't know a healthy way to resolve a conflict with your child if it came up and bit you on the nose. But get help.
Yeah.
Ask for help. Seek help. Go to places that are likely to have help. So, in other words, I'm not going to judge anybody. Lord, help me. Not that I don't occasionally. But the ultimate ask that I would have is, hey, I get how and why you might be the way you are, but it's not okay to not do something about it.
Yeah.
I like to say this, Joey. You may not be responsible for the way you are, but you are responsible for changing the way you are.
Yeah.
You didn't get to pick your parents. You didn't get to pick your childhood. You didn't get to pick your skin color, socioeconomic class, your gender. You didn't get to pick all that. And so what does that mean? That means that virtually all the factors that made you who and what you are, you had no choice.
Right.
How in the world are we going to judge people for that?
Yeah.
Now, here's the problem. When you can tell something's off the rails, ask for help, man.
Yeah.
Ask for help and keep asking.
Yeah.
And keep asking.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Because here's where it gets juicy and exciting to me, Joey. We can see most of this stuff occurs in generational cycles, and life's like a multi-generational relay race, and you just kind of pass the baton to the next generation. Well, what's exciting is if you ask for help, and maybe you can't totally turn your bus around, but you get it turned 45 degrees. Do you realize that you can alter the path of that generational relay race?
Yeah.
It may take several generations to stop dysfunction, but it's not going to stop at all if somebody doesn't put their hand up and say, I don't think I'm doing this right.
Right.
And I'm not even sure I know what right looks like.
I understand what you're saying, and I agree. And I think that my issue is that I don't know what it feels like not to at least have the checks and balances of this just almost out of hand love I have for my kids that sounds like all of my peers are experiencing the same thing. Sounds like my parents and you guys talk about y'all's kids in the same way. And so the father that has a sickness of molesting kids, I don't understand how he chooses his daughter. Like, I just don't get it. And that's not even necessarily, like, sure, I'm angry about little girls being molested, especially by their dads, but I'm not even talking about anger here. I'm saying, what is it does he not feel what I feel for my kids? Or is it just not accessible? Because if I am a pervert that feels like I have to do that, and I'm not, but if I was, I don't know if there would be something in my head that would allow me to do that to my children, knowing that I'm going to destroy their lives. I mean, does that make sense? Like, what you know how you feel about your kids. You wouldn't do anything like that to harm them. Now, you have accidentally harmed them in ways by just being imperfect, but striking your kids all the time.
Joey.
What's that?
speak for yourself, Joey.
All right, perfect. Perfect Miyagi dad.
I'm just kidding. Joey, I would say that would be in my top 2 or 3 for sure issues that are the hardest for me to wrap my head around.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair enough.
I mean, I again, forgive me for anybody for how this is going to sound, but I get sexual perversion experiment. In other words, I get that sexuality exists on a continuum. And I mean, I didn't get saved till 23. So I understand how your sense of right and wrong can get pretty skewed, but the kind of situation you're talking about is crossing so many lines.
Right.
That now, have I worked with people in those situations? Yes. Am I very effective with the perpetrators? I don't know that I would say that I am, because kind of like what you said, Joey, I can't, what I'm pretty good at as a counselor is getting my head inside of what this dysfunctional behavior you're trapped in, and how it must feel, and why your thinking makes sense to you.
Right.
I can't do that with this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just at several different levels.
Yeah.
I can't. Now, I believe it's a spiritual issue. I mean, if anybody questions whether there's evil, I mean, it's just evil that you would prey on your own children. Now, I don't mean that to write the person off, but I'm just saying that that's a really complex, twisted, multifaceted situation.
Right.
And unfortunately, again, it tends to be generationally cyclical.
Yeah.
Not guaranteed. So don't anybody think, well, if it ever happened in my family, I got it. I don't mean it that way. But the propensity for it, the tendency, the susceptibility, but it's rough stuff, man. Gosh, I've seen and heard stories, Joey, that I don't even know where to put them.
Yeah. I
do not even know where to put them.
I don't even like the sound of that, and you didn't even give any examples. Gracious, good. Yeah, I mean, I have seen families operate in a way where I don't doubt any of their love for each other, and I know that there was sexual abuse in the past with the very people that I'm being around. And I'm like, I don't know how that works. Like, I don't know how. Right. So I guess you're right. I mean, that is definitely something that is way more complicated to use as a simple example of parents that don't treat their kids well.
Well, I mean, I think it's way past that.
Yeah. I give my dad major props because he had a very, very poor example of a dad, and I felt like I had a really good dad. But here's a perfect example of your banging the drum of people are doing the best of what they can with what they're working with, what they have, and all that. So my grandfather, my dad's dad, he lost his mom at 8. His dad died when his mom was pregnant with him in the flu epidemic. He got sent to his uncle's house at 8 years old. Uncle, when his girls became teenagers, he felt like it was improper for their first cousin to be around who was also a teenager. So he sent him to an orphanage. This is his uncle.
Oh my gosh!
Sent him to an orphanage. And so he basically grows up in an orphanage and then is shipped off to Burma, fights in World War II, and sees all sorts of things. I find out later on in his life that he actually killed someone with his bare hands. And I'm thinking, no wonder my grandfather was such a grouchy, inconsiderate bully of a man. Now, I say all that, and he's family, and he was my grandpa, and obviously there was sweet parts of him, and those are the sorts of things that I internalized as a kid. So I don't have any ill will towards him, but he wasn't my dad. My dad tells me stories about him being in Little League and there being a pop fly, and my dad is like an 8-year-old missing the ball and his dad yelling Butterfingers and laughing at him in front of all the parents. And it's interesting too, and I want to be respectful of my dad, but I feel like my dad doesn't realize how impactful that is still on his life. Like he will say with his words, yeah, I mean, I don't let that stuff bother me. But just the very fact that he is recalling this story that happened 60 years ago, to me, clues me in on it definitely affected him.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, that's a great example, Joey, because I mean, let's go all the way back to the uncle. Let's just say the uncle himself had issues with lust.
Right.
In other words, let's say he had a hard time controlling his thoughts and feelings toward women. So he projects that onto his nephew,
right.
Whether it's real or not. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But the bottom line is he's like, I'm not leaving the fox in the hen house.
Right. Right.
So he makes an unkind decision that alters the course of another human being's life. And then here's another thought. So here's your grandfather, and he goes to an orphanage, and who knows what may have happened there, and goes to Burma and fights in the war. And here's my thing, Joey. Where do you put that stuff?
Right.
Where do you put the pictures, the feelings, the smells of you killing another human being? Where do we get the idea that the soul is designed in such a way that we just package that up and put it up on shelf 3?
Right.
Dude, where do you put that?
Right.
And we just, especially us as Christians, we have this cheesy, easy, like, brother, just renew your mind, man.
Right.
You don't need to think about that anymore. I mean, dude, really?
Yeah.
And that's part of what drives me and all this stuff, Joey, is that we underestimate the impact of what some of life's experiences have on us.
Yeah.
And I'm not minimizing or underestimating the power of God and what God can do, but that's kind of my point. My point is that is what we need, and we need people that understand the process better, the process of how we get to be the way we are, and then the process it's going to take to get us to not be the way we are.
Yeah.
I mean, we could talk about the different parts of your brain that are involved in fear and responses and stuff like that. And it's a trickier situation than most of us want to wrestle with.
Yeah.
And I've had to, because I love trying to help people. And the longer you do it, the more you realize that our little bumper sticker answers don't work.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. You know, and I will say this too, and not to puff your head up too much, but I think.
Oh, go ahead.
I think what you say, as far as just the rule of thumb, hey, process people's behavior through the filter of, and this doesn't give them an excuse, but they're doing the best they can. I think that's the only way we can love like Jesus loves people, and I think that's exactly what he did and why he was able to do that, because he saw a bigger picture. But I don't love the child molester outside of that knowledge, knowing that dude did not wake up as a 6-year-old and say, you know what, when I'm old, I'm going to touch little kids my age. I mean, it just didn't happen. Like, from an early age up in, yeah. So I really do think that what you're saying here and what you have been saying for a long time is probably going to be some people's ticket to not only forgiveness, but also just having a little more mercy in their hearts for people that they see from afar as well. I mean, what would you tell any of our listeners who may not have any chance for reconciliation, whether it's a parent that passed away or a friend that will never talk to them again, but they have some deeply, deeply rooted hurts from being molested or date raped or just whatever? I mean,
from that person?
Yeah, I'm saying what do these people do with that, given that there may not be any reconciliation around the corner because of the other person?
I mean, I would say, gosh, I don't know what percentage, but more than 50%, there probably isn't going to be reconciliation. So it's the norm typically. I mean, I think, like I said, separating explanation from excuse, the bottom line is you know, when I need to work through judging someone and not forgiving them and wrestling with all that, one of the things I like to do is just get in front of the mirror and remind myself how much I've been forgiven for. Now, I may come away saying, well, you know, my sins are a 3, his or hers are a 6 or an 8 or whatever. But somewhere in there, I'm going to be able to say, you know, I cannot say that it didn't totally wreck my life, totally take my life down a path that, gosh, it would have been so much easier if that hadn't happened.
Yeah.
But it's hurting me more than it is this other person for me to hold on to it. I don't know what made them what they are, but something did.
Yeah.
And you know what, God? That's your territory. That's your judge, jury, and executor of judgment. I don't mean executor. And it, dude, it's hard, man. It's hard. I completely get that, because someone can do things to us that send our life in directions that are just not fair.
Yep.
And
well, I appreciate you coming on here. Oh, go ahead.
Let me say one more thought. The ultimate revenge is making the best you can out of the life you have. The ultimate revenge is, you know what? It knocked me for a loop, but God, let's do the best we can with what I've got.
Yep. As always, thanks for coming on here and dropping some truth that could be helpful to a lot of people. Thank you, sir.
All right, man. Love you, dude.